Swift's new Life of a Showgirl album cover photo has sparked quite the controversy when this side-by-side started making the rounds. Many blamed Photoshop, AI, or even Botox. Same outfit, same pose, same bathtub scene, but Taylor looks totally different. Honestly, I had to do a double take too. But as a 15-year portrait photography veteran, I quickly spotted a few key reasons for the dramatic visual difference. Let's see how many you can spot. And there's actually one most people overlook, but every portrait photographer needs to understand if you want finer control over how your subject looks on camera. There's actually a few contributing factors, but the first thing I like to look at when looking at any image is the light. And we can see from the highlights on their faces here that the lighting is actually similar in both of the images here. If we look at the highlight on her nose, and then again, kind of the main highlight on the cheek, the nose, and the chin, very similar on both images, telling us that it's likely some overhead softboxes, possibly at a slight angle. The other thing we want to look at is the shadows. And you'll notice on the cover art, the shadows are nice and soft beneath that chin, a very gradual gradient, and also in the water, which that's partially due to the substance added to the water, but also has to do with the lighting in the scene. Whereas we'll notice the shadows in the video are much more defined, much darker shadows. And these deeper shadows tell us the lighting is a little bit harsher. It's still a pretty soft quality of light, but a little bit harder than the cover shoot, which lends to that more defined look of her face. Because of this, at first glance, I thought the cover shot would have had much larger softboxes that were closer to her for that glowy wraparound light. However, one trick when studying lighting is to not just look at the shadows, but also the catch lights in the eyes. And if we look at the catch lights in her eyes in the cover shoot versus the music video, we'll notice that even though the cover shoot appears softer, the music video has a much larger light source, despite the fact that that light would have had to be much further back to be out of the frame for the way that it was continuously shot in the video. So that tells us it was a much, much larger light source in the music video. So why is the cover shot so much softer, even though it was a much smaller light? Well, it's due to all of the reflected light in the scene. And as a lifestyle photographer who shoots mostly on location, reflected light and bounce light from sky to walls to other neutral colored reflectors are my best friend when it comes to creating soft and flattering portraits, because these large areas of bounce light will be much softer than any teeny tiny reflector or even a small softbox. And this is really a perfect example of that. In this case here, they shot inside a studio environment, but these guys, being experts at what they do and having created similar bathtub scenes like this before, have really dialed in the perfect light. They've essentially surrounded our girl Taylor in not just a bath, but a bath of light. The white tub inside the scene, the studio environment, likely some bounce cards, and even the water, which has that milk bath substance added to it to reflect the light, all add to a really glowy scene. And in contrast to that, though the catch lights in the eyes tell us the main light source in the video is bigger, it was actually filmed in a black room, which looks amazing on camera, but black sucks up all that light. And also because of the constraints of video, there's not going to be any bounce cards to reflect light back into those shadows. And the other thing we'll notice is the slight angle of Taylor's face in this one. So here she's looking at a slight angle. We can tell because we're missing part of the eyebrow here. And also if we look at like the shape of her eye here versus here, because we're getting all of that eyebrow, there's a much rounder shape, and that will also contribute to a little bit more round appearance. Even though it's not perfectly symmetrical, it is more symmetrical than the way the music video was filmed. And then the other thing I noticed is very subtle. As far as retouching goes, I noticed a little bit of retouching on the cheek line. We have less of a cheek line in the cover scene. I even like zoomed in and you can see some of the pixels are softened here, letting us know that that cheek area was softened, or maybe even the cheek line was removed entirely. It's well done, but because of the cheek line being removed, what happens here is it has the effect of this entire area looking like the cheek. So it's like one continuous piece of skin versus when we have that cheek line, it looks like a smaller cheek. As we can see, all these things contribute to the softer, more youthful look of the cover image versus the more sculpted look of the music video, but they actually aren't the main reason Taylor looks so different between the two. So let's talk a bit more in depth about what's really happening in these photos. The biggest difference we'll notice is when it comes to Taylor Swift's face shape. And if I were to go ahead and bring our images back in and I'll overlay them on top of each other here, you can really see the difference between the two. And we can even come in and I'll go ahead and draw right on top of Taylor's face here. And you can see her eyes appear bigger, her cheeks are a little bit fuller. And if we were to toggle it, we do have a pretty big difference between the two. Even like the face appears elongated, not just slimmer. And if I were to outline the hairline here, it really shows it. We'll go ahead and toggle this back on. And you can see in the music video, her face has gotten longer and a little bit more narrow. So with going back and forth between the two, you can really tell the difference. And this is not Photoshop. It's lens choice, and more specifically has to do with the role that focal length plays in compressing facial features when photographing portraits of people. Let's break this down. The video was shot with a wide focal length lens, probably something equivalent to a 24mm or a 35mm like this. The album cover, however, was shot with a longer focal length, probably something closer to an 85mm or even a 105mm, shot pretty high up from a ladder to get high above Taylor to shoot down. So why did the photo and video teams choose such wildly different lenses? Well, first, it helps to know a few things. You probably already know that focal length determines your field of view or how much of the scene your lens sees. Lower focal lengths like 35mm will have a wider field of view, showing more of the scene. And this is really great for cinematic shots where you want to tell more of the story, which made it the perfect choice for the music video, which quickly moves from scene to scene, ending with a wide pano shot of Taylor's showgirl persona ending the night in the bathtub. On the flip side, higher lengths like 85mm, 105mm, and even the 200mm have a much tighter field of view, showing less of the scene when shot at the same distance. These are often considered more flattering lenses for portraits, making it the perfect choice for the editorial shoot and the cover image. But why is that? Well, to illustrate, here's a quick example from my photography course, Shoot to Edit, to show how focal length and compression play an impact in shaping our subject's body and facial features. Kind of wild that this is the same girl, right? These two images here were shot minutes apart. In fact, she didn't change her hair or even move. The major difference between these two is the focal length of the lens. And similar to the cover shot of Taylor Swift, the image on the right was shot with a longer focal length lens. Now, I'm not gonna get overly technical here, but to break down what's happening in a really simple way, the longer the lens, the more you're going to need to back away from your subject. And the more distance between you and the subject, the more compression there's gonna be. This compression makes the background elements appear larger and closer, like you'll see in the second example here. In the image shot with the 24mm, the mountain is like tiny, just a sliver. And in the 200mm shot, the mountain seemingly almost grows, completely filling the frame. Now, this knowledge of how different lenses impact our scene is obviously helpful to know as professional photographers, but the more important thing I wanted to share here is that this compression also impacts facial features. Everything behind the focus point is being flattened, including parts of the face. So if we were to go back to our other example, notice how the model's nose appears smaller, the hair looks fuller in the image shot with the 200mm. In contrast, with a wide angle lens, we need to move much closer to our subject in order to get that same close-up portrait. And this is going to eliminate any of that compression effect, and it's also going to cause distortion, as we can see in the image on the left. And really, even comparing a standard 50mm lens to a 200mm is quite dramatic. And this is why for tighter portraits, I usually recommend avoiding anything below a 50mm, and typically for my own portraits, prefer shooting with an 85mm and above. And I'll use something like a 200mm when there's certain facial features my clients have shared that they would love to de-emphasize, anything that they are maybe a little self-conscious about. By the way, if you like this example, I go more in depth on this and several other ways to flatter your subjects and create high-end portraits in a free 45-minute class called the Premium Portfolio Workshop. I'll link it up in the description for you to check out after this. So compression is really the main reason Taylor looks so different. In the video, there's no compression happening because of the wider lens. However, you may notice there wasn't much distortion either. This is because in the side-by-sides that I shared, I actually cropped the video image in post so that it would be a much easier direct comparison. But in the actual video clip, you'll see the cinematographer stopped before getting too close and really only cropped about 3/4 body length, which is about the maximum closeness I would also get for portraits when I'm shooting with wider lenses. So I'm curious, who do you think did better, the cinematographer or the still photographer? I think both did amazing work in this. Each clearly had their own vision, their own constraints, and made very intentional choices to evoke a very specific feeling that they were after. With the 85 to 105mm used in the cover art, it created a really striking intimate portrait where the soft lighting, the editing, and the compression of features create a sense of intimacy and femininity that's contrasted by that bold gaze. And with the wider 24 to 35mm, it was really the perfect choice for the more cinematic storytelling approach of the music video. Everything from the light to the angle really added to that more raw look and depth of the video clips. So did you notice anything I didn't? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to learn how to edit more flattering portraits as well, watch this video next, where I'll show you exactly how I edit portraits to get that glowy premium finish. See you in the next video.